Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From the Mount, a podcast from the campus of Mount Perrin Christian School. I'm your host, Steve Kyle, and glad to be with you on another episode. And I'm excited because we have two brand new guests on this episode, two people who have never not only been on this podcast, I don't think, have you guys either been on any podcast ever? This is your first ever podcast.
Yep. I've done one outside of school.
Oh, outside of school.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. Well, then you're a veteran then. You've done more than most, but we are, I'm excited because this one is something, it's not something, obviously, if you saw the title and description of it, I don't know anything about it. I mean, other than what I learned from being here at Mount Perrin, but it's a really important subject. And not only that, I'm going to hear about stuff I've never actually heard before because our guest that's going to be on here, I'm really excited to hear your story because I'm going to hear most of it for the very first time today. But two guests, brand new on here in the actual co-host seat. You're in the co-host seat. Our normal co-host is not here with us, but we have Miss Katina Taliaferro here serving kind of as co-host today. So Katina, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. Katina is our Director of Diversity and Belonging here at Mount Perrin. And so, Katina, for somebody who doesn't know you or what that is, who are you and what is that?
Okay. Well, thank you, Steve. I'm so excited to be here. First, just to introduce myself, my name is Katina Taliaferro. The students called me Miss T. Both of my children were both lifers here at Mount Perrin. My son was class of 2017 and my daughter was class of 2020. So I have been a parent here since 2004 and I've been an employee here since 2012. And this is my fifth year in the role of diversity, Director of Diversity and Belonging.
So and I've been here 8 years, and of course you've been here all 8 of those years. I had the privilege of being here at the same time as Tiana, and got to know her, and then, of course, get the privilege of working with your hubby, who also works here as well.
Yes.
But for someone who doesn't know, they're listening to this for the very first time, quick snapshot, diversity and belonging. What does that entail at Mount Perrin?
So diversity and belonging here at Mount Perrin, we do have an acronym that we use called GRACE. And GRACE stands for G is gender, man and woman as God is created. R is for race. The A is for age and ability, and the C is for culture, which is language, customs, beliefs, and then the E is economic status, which is socioeconomic. So I'm really excited that we will have Carly speaking on the A part of GRACE today, which is the ability part.
Yeah, that is
diversity.
Great. So if you're listening because there are positions like this certainly out in other places, whether it's a Christian school or not, here, of course, it fills a very unique role in understanding the way God's made us, and that diversity is way more than what we oftentimes put it in one little, and today's episode is going to talk a little bit about that because we're going to be talking about neurodiversity, which sounds like a big fancy word, but it's not. Thankfully for me, it's not that big and fancy. And you've already mentioned her, but I'm excited we are excited to have Miss Carly Wisniewski on our episode today. And so, Carly, welcome, first of all.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. For those, just let's find out really quick, because people love when they're listening to, who am I listening to? Who is this person? So just give us a quick snapshot of you. Who is Carly Wisniewski? Where are you from? Like, how did you, are you a lifer in the Kennesaw, Marietta area? Like, tell us quickly about yourself.
I grew up in Phoenix City, Alabama, so about an hour and a half, 2 hours south of here. Columbus, Georgia was the site of the 1996 softball Olympics.
Yes.
So we were part of that a long time ago. I moved up to Atlanta after college in 2008, and that's when I started teaching in Sandy Springs. And then I got married, and we moved to the burbs. So we moved to Woodstock.
Right.
It's quite a drive to Mount Perrin.
Because that's where you are still.
Yes.
Now.
So we are
Woodstock.
there. Yes. And so my son John, he started kindergarten in fall of 2020, and he is in 4th grade now.
Got it.
And
Your only child?
Nope. And
Yeah.
and then
Well-
so he started in 2020. He's been here since kindergarten. And then Campbell, she is in pre-K 3 this year. So this is her first year. Yes.
Exciting. So 2 kids here. And we're obviously going to be talking a little bit about John in that journey today. So for people to know that. Well, how long have you been teaching and working here at Mount Perrin?
So this is my 3rd year. I started to I was here as a parent for John's first few years here, and the 5th grade DS position came open. And so that's my background, teaching kids with dyslexia. I have a special education background. I've taught in the regular education classroom as well as the special education classroom in public and private school settings. So when I found out that this position was open, it's just where my heart is. And yeah.
DS, by the way, directed studies.
Oh,
Sometimes
yes.
somebody may be listening and they're like, what's DS? Is that something to do with, they got to, I find out, there's lots of things I didn't even know. And then I'm like, oh, thanks for someone explaining that to me. So DS, and it's an unbelievably important thing here. So Katina, you actually, when we were talking about that, you came to me about Carly.
Yes.
Yeah. And we're like, hey, this needs to happen.
Absolutely. And to me, there's no better person to talk about it. So I love Carly. We are breast cancer survivors, and we also teach 7th grade Bible study together.
Awesome.
And so Carly is just a wealth of knowledge. I'm just so excited for her to share just her experience, but most importantly, her testimony.
Yeah. So if you're listening, you obviously get to see the title of these. So you just know a little snapshot about what this is going to be and talking about neurodiversity and specifically your journey, in your own life, but then also teaching in directed studies, teaching in a place like that it's a unique perspective that, from what little I know, is one only that you have this really unique thing that very few would have the opportunity to have. So, well, I think we built it up enough that people are listening. Can you just let Carly tell us her story? So let's hear your story about John.
Sure. John, he was born, it was not anything complicated. Everything seemed normal. One kind of outlying thing that we had to keep up with was he failed his hearing test at newborn screening. And so we went for subsequent tests, and everything checked out fine. Then 2.5 years later, I'm like, something's not right. He's not talking like his peers who are also 2.5 are talking. And his pediatrician was like, okay, I think it's time for you to go see an audiologist. So we did that, and we found out he had hearing loss. It's genetic. My husband and I both carry the recessive gene for it.
Huh.
But no one in our family has hearing loss. It was something completely new to our family.
Now, did you and your husband even know that before you had children, that you had that?
No idea.
Okay, got it.
So any type of testing would not have pulled this up, anything that I would have had tested during pregnancy or anything. So total shocker. We had no idea about it. But my husband and I are very much go-getters. And so we immediately put him into the Atlanta Speech School. They have the Ham Center, which is a preschool for kids with hearing loss, various ranges of hearing loss. And it was just such a good fit for him. We knew that he had always had some access to sound, so he didn't necessarily need sign language, but we chose to go the audio-verbal route and for him to just learn through spoken language. And that's kind of how the Ham Center approaches hearing loss and language. So he was there, and he was there for a few years. Well, the drive from Woodstock to Atlanta was a lot. So I started working there in their dyslexia school. And it was just such a blessing for both of us, really. I was able to do what I love to do, but also know that he was taken care of. And it was just incredible the amount of progress he made from not being able to talk to being able to hear well. Sorry, I totally forgot about that part. So he got hearing aids, and then a year later, his hearing was going up and down in his right ear. And so we decided at 3.5 to get a cochlear implant. And so he has a cochlear implant on one side of his ear, or one ear, and a hearing aid on the other. And so once he was able to have better access to sound, then that's when the intervention and the therapy really took off. And so he got through the ham center through pre-K, and then we had to decide what to do. And it was COVID. and just trying
worst.
to make the decision about where are we going to do. And my husband and I both went to private school. And so we knew that was an option. I knew that he didn't necessarily need the intensive special education services that a public school could provide, but that we wanted him to have a smaller environment. The main thing was Christian education. That was very, very important to us. And just knowing that he would be supported, and knowing that Mount Perrin had this directed studies program, that is one of the reasons I think is so special about Mount Perrin, that we were able to just learn more about that. We toured. I'll never forget. We walked out of the tour and my husband's like, I don't want to go anywhere else. This is it. This is where I want to be. This is where I want John to be. And it just, from then on, we just had a peace about knowing that this place would be somewhere that he would grow up, starting in kindergarten, and that he would be known and loved by his peers, by his teachers. And I'll never forget, I might cry when I say this, but meeting with Katie Rogers and just the blessing that she was on us during the whole admissions process. I'll never forget, I showed her a video of John reading, and because I wanted her to see what it was like for a kid who had hearing loss to speak. Because when you think of hearing loss, there's so many ranges of what it's like for a kid what their speech sounds like. And I just wanted her to be able to hear him and just put a face and, who he was. And we both ended the meeting in tears because I just told her just our story. And it was just a really, really special time. And then Stephanie Young, she was the PE occupational therapist at the speech school, and she's a parent here. And she was a huge advocate for John too, and just really was able to speak to just who he is, who his heart is, and just the awesome kid that he is. And then one more little blessing I want to mention. Last year, 3rd grade, Miss Kehoe was his teacher, and she's fluent in sign language. And that was the coolest thing. I just we've gone through kindergarten all the way up until now in 4th grade, and every year we can just see these little instances of how the Lord has just moved. And Miss Kehoe taught them sign language last year, and John was to the point where he didn't want to talk about his hearing loss. It wasn't a thing that he just didn't like attention on him, and he still doesn't. But she just really empowered him to be proud of how he is and how he's made, and the what he can do and how he can feel confident in that. So just the people who's been put in his life being at Mount Perrin has just been incredible.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, just listen to that. I mean, someone's running on their old treadmill crying right now listening to this episode. It is.
Love
go
that.
ahead. I don't know.
So how would you say your experience, everything that you learned from John, it was very unexpected, as you were saying. It wasn't anything that you nor your husband knew. And then you have this wonderful, sweet boy, John. And then you also have a special education background as well. And so how do you feel like your professional experience and your experience as a mother of a child with learning exceptionalities has impacted your faith?
Sure. I think as a teacher, I want to be a faithful steward of what the Lord has entrusted me with by sharing the gospel and being his hands and feet. And I want every student I come in contact with to know that they are made for a purpose. And I want to steward them towards that. Also that they are fearfully and wonderfully made in his image. I want to celebrate who God made them to be. And my faith is deepened every day when I see God's active presence at work. through his plan for me as a teacher and how he's working in the hearts of my kiddos. I think one really big thing is just an unwavering belief in their potential and what that looks like day in and day out in the classroom. As a mom, I think the first thing is just being an advocate for John and teaching him to speak up and say what he needs in the classroom, because maybe he can't hear something well or he needs someone to repeat something. And just walking through the teachers every year with him and just teaching them what it's like for him to have hearing loss and how they can help him in the classroom. The teachers have just every year are amazing and just so willing to accommodate him and help him just to make sure that he's understanding. And then managing the ups and downs. It can be kind of emotional, maybe more for me and my husband than John, but he's just so happy-go-lucky. And I know the Lord made him that way on purpose, he just takes everything in stride. And I know that we are all here for a purpose, and our goal is to glorify God through it all.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, to hear that when you think about that, because again, somebody's listening right now with a child, something similar, maybe not hearing loss or some other, learning.
Exceptionality.
Yeah, exceptionality.
Yes.
I don't know what all the
Yes.
fancy terms are, a unique way in which God has made them. And they're feeling overwhelmed or discouraged, who just got encouraged and who just felt that way. And again, if I'm listening going, wow, that's my experience, with my kids. Or if I don't have a child here, I'm thinking I want that experience for my kids. And you kind of, I think it was awesome. You kind of addressed this whole, not only how it's impacted your faith, but even how you interweave that into teaching. Because what grades do you primarily focus on for those that are listening?
Fifth grade.
Fifth grade only. Now, obviously, you are you hear teach fifth grade, but you can really, obviously, if someone was like, hey, we need you to do lower school neurodiversity, you're qualified to do various grade levels,
Sure.
correct?
Yep.
Yeah. And so, but fifth grade, that's a significantly transitional time.
Yeah.
And how do those kids see themselves? What are some of the things that they're wrestling with individually, or again, not, and I shouldn't say not, maybe I had some exceptionality about me that I had no idea. I'm certainly, I think there's a few undiagnosed things I struggle with.
I definitely have that.
Even as an adult, but and managing that, do you see kids discouraged or low self-esteem? How do you speak into that, and what's part of that process, for example, in your classroom for a fifth grader?
Yeah, it's all about building rapport in the beginning of the year and just building that relationship with them and just letting them know that I believe in them. And if I believe, then I hope that maybe they will believe in them too, and believe truths about them, about who God has made them to be, and that we are all made uniquely by God with a purpose. And I think that creating my room just as a safe place for where they feel heard and known and loved, open communication with parents and with the kids. I talk to parents a lot, and I just want to be the encourager to let them know that I am here to walk alongside with them.
Wow. I would think, especially as a parent, that kind of encouragement, not only from a teacher who's teaching it, but from a mom who's living it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, to me, that you are probably, they're like, oh yeah, that's what you probably tell everybody. And you're like, no, listen, I've been there.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I'm walking through with my own son, and what a lot of people don't get that kind of perspective.
Well, I look at it this way, and I'm very thankful for that. I think the Lord just has kind of orchestrated that in such a beautiful way. Before John was diagnosed with hearing loss, 3 months before that is when I was diagnosed with cancer. And so that was just a really very challenging time spiritually, just emotionally, physically, everything. And we were just going through a lot as a family. And I kept coming back to this verse, John 9:3. And it's when Jesus heals a blind man, and he said, I'll read the scripture. Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. And I just love that, because I want it, the result of me having breast cancer or my son having hearing loss and that affecting so much about our daily lives. Like, I don't look at that as a problem or a punishment, but rather, like, the Lord wants me to use that to display him and glorify him. And so when I think of all that we've been through, I just have this really firm belief knowing that I'm just going to walk through it. And in this season, I'm going to glorify God. And I hope that I can encourage parents who are on this journey too, through my experience.
Wow. 100% you already have, no
Yes.
doubt. And people that are listening, feeling already encouraged to hear the story and feel like, will they ever, and again, I'm making quotes if you're not watching this, will my kid ever be normal, for them to realize they're actually better than normal. Like, they're when you talk about normal, it's like, no, that is when I hear you talk about John's story, it's not even like you're sad or kind of, there's this like, I've seen what God's done already. I've watched him work up through where he's at now in the fourth grade. And now, will you work with him when he's in the fifth grade?
No. I cannot.
Said every parent of their child.
So you're like, nope, not going to happen.
I will work with him a lot at home, but not in my classroom.
Not in the classroom. Got it. Okay, so you've already thought down this road already.
Oh yes.
And you're like, this isn't going to happen.
Nope.
We want to keep everything. And that's probably, again, I don't know how that would work, having to, in an environment like that, but to hear you talk about it is not only, but it's embracing this beautiful way God's made you. And that this idea that, you've had hearing loss, but look at the way that God's revealing himself to others through you and your story and your encouragement. And then even you, to hear you tell that story as a mom, and what encouragement that is to another mom or a dad going, ooh. And even for the parent yet to have children who's listening to this, who will remember this when whatever they find out about their child's exceptionality, and they're like, but I remember this. What an awesome way we're going to have to display the glory of God in what they do. That's so awesome. So anyway, I know you were looking down. What do you want to add?
Yes. So, Carly, what nugget would you share with us all to increase our understanding just of neurodiversity in our community?
Yeah. If we're a listener like me, kind of, and I do understand some, but there are a lot of people who don't. What are some takeaways that you could give the listener right now, whether I have a child that's part of this, has an exceptionality or not? If I'm just listening to this podcast because it's an interesting subject and I want to hear your story, what would you share that I could take away on whether it's how do I help? How can I, if I have a child this way, what are the kind of nuggets you give?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I look at dyslexia, and ADHD and hearing loss, all these different just differences that children learn in different ways. And I try to empower kids, because dyslexia, Albert Einstein had dyslexia. Like, just because you have trouble reading, your brain is wired in a way that is so amazing for other things. And so it's what you mentioned earlier, what is normal. I like to just try not to think of it that way, because being normal, what is being normal? What is the baseline for that? And so I want to focus on who they are individually, because we are all uniquely made and we all have these unique strengths and challenges. And by focusing on the strengths and the interests that these children have, that's going to build their confidence. But also, I try to really empower them to have a growth mindset, and that maybe you don't know this yet, but this is a journey. And me, with my family, I mean, we're on the other side of this journey. I mean, it's still a journey, but we're on the other side of the really hard and the sad and the worry. And so just being able to share my faith and I just think that is such an integral part of our journey as a family. We couldn't have made it without it. And just knowing that we can appreciate all differences because that is who God made them to be. And in doing so, we're reflecting the heart of Christ. And I mean, that makes us rooted in our faith, and we can love others how He's commanded us to love.
I love that. Were there any like Bible verses or Bible stories that you kind of leaned on, particularly during this time, that might help another family?
Yeah. I mean, John 9:3 has been kind of our big verse, but I have a few others that just have really just impacted me. One of them is Nehemiah when he was building the wall, and he is doing this great work, and he keeps other people, the messengers, try to divert his attention from his goal. And in Nehemiah 6:3, he says, "And I sent messengers to them saying, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. Why should I stop the work? Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you?" And he was just so focused on his goal, and why be so worried about the other things when you know what you're doing is good? And that helps me just know that we can just keep going and not to be bogged down by the hard things or the things that just seem so hard in the moment.
Yeah.
And that's easier for me to say because I'm on the other side of it.
Yeah.
But that is just so encouraging to me. And the other thing is Paul just charging Timothy in 2 Timothy, just saying that God has called us to a holy calling and that we've been entrusted with the gospel, that the Holy Spirit dwells in us, and we need to guard that and be entrusted to share the gospel. And so I look through everything through the lens of who God is and how He has impacted me, because that's the only way I can get through it.
Wow. I think I'm glad you asked that question, Katina. To finish with this, the truth of Scripture. And I know that we can't, and we will talk more in the future on specifics having to do with neurodiversity, because there's so many things I've been learning this year through some of the stuff we've been doing. We'll be doing this, but what an awesomely encouraging episode for so many people, even if what they're struggling with is not even neurodiversity. If I'm just going through a really bad, I don't know how, Katina, you would not be encouraged by just hearing your story and spirit about the whole thing. So, Carly, thank you for coming on and sharing that story. Katina, we've got like 3 other things probably we're going to bring you back for to talk about, because diversity covers a lot of stuff.
It does.
Yeah. And
It
so
does.
we could do episodes about all of those things. So you're going to be hearing
it.
more from Katina. But Katina, thank you for coming
Thank you.
and for bringing this story right to the forefront. So awesome to have you ladies on. And I want to thank you guys for listening to another episode of From the Mount.